Papa worked here at this garage and he worked nearby at Parkhead as well. And my dad drove out of 3 garages on the south side of Glasgow. So ever since I was a very wee boy, I've been around buses, Glasgow Corporation buses in particular.
When I was a wee boy going to primary school, in those days the buses all had radiators, and they had different radiators, and some said Leyland and some said Guy, and I noticed that. And of course my dad, who wasn't particularly interested, but he would explain to me, oh, that's a different make, son. And ever since then I've been interested, and I've followed that through. Right anorak hobby. I've followed it through my whole life, right to the present day, where of course I'm involved now with the GVVT.
I've drove buses and coaches all my days, so I've not got another hobby, to tell you the truth, apart from gardening. My wife says I'm rubbish at that.
I was on my way to primary school for the first day. I passed these huge, shiny, very impressive vehicles, and I was hooked from then on.
I wouldn't believe what my mother says, which apparently my first word was bus. I don't think that's actually the case, but certainly since I was a very small kid, buses have featured somewhere along the lines. And as time goes on, your interests in your hobby kind of grow, and before you know it, you've bought a bus. The Glasgow Vintage Vehicle Trust is a small charity, and its purpose is to look after vintage vehicles, to preserve those vehicles and to provide a centre of excellence where the repair and restoration of those vehicles can take place. It's also set up to be active in the local community, and that activity takes a range of forms. It can be events, it can be a social inclusion programme, or it could be our outreach activities.
In 1924, the corporation decided to run motorbuses for the first time. That was rather late compared to other cities, and Glasgow had become dominantly a tram operating city, entirely electric very early, very frequent, very cheap services that were still very heavily used and very profitable in the early 1920s. But the decision was taken initially on a trial basis to use motorbuses to feed into trams. Social housing began to be built in areas to the west and the south of the city centre with much lower population densities. So we're talking semi-detached housing and 4 inner block flats instead of 6 high tenements in the city centre. Services were more dispersed too. So further distances, lower densities meant that the bus was a lower capital first cost proposition to serve these areas rather than the dense inner city parts of Glasgow where the tram had excelled.
So the parade's going to bookend 100 years basically. We've got 111 there from 1928, and we've got 2 electric buses coming from first. So I'll be there at the entrance to West Carriageway, and I'll direct the drivers in terms of where they need to go. The way we're choosing to mark this 100 years of Glasgow Corporation buses is with a procession through the centre of Glasgow. The route will run from Glasgow Green, it will go through the Merchant City, on through George Square, up St Vincent Street, and over into the West End past Kelvin Grove Art Gallery Museum and arriving at the Riverside Museum. When we get to Riverside Museum, we'll park all the vehicles up on display so people can wander around them and see more and speak to our volunteers and hear more about them. One of the things that we're going to do to support the procession is have the bus behind me take part. This is a special bus. It's now the oldest surviving Glasgow Corporation bus in existence. It dates from 1928, so indeed it's nearly 100 years old itself. We've been given permission by the owner to let it take part in the parade and for it to be here at the garage over the course of this year as we celebrate this anniversary. So this will lead the procession through the city and create quite a spectacle, we hope. With the procession, we're trying to assemble as many roadworthy former Glasgow Corporation buses and their successor companies together at the one time. So we're starting off at the head of the line with the 1928 Leyland Titan, which is behind me, which is the oldest surviving Glasgow Corporation bus. And then we're going to try and
have as many buses that fill in the years from then until now. So we'll have a number of vehicles, certainly from the late 1950s, early 1960s, which are buses that we have out regularly, which are popular for our events. So those will be traditional half-cab buses, as they call them. That's where the driver's in his own cab, and the bus tends to have an open platform at the back with the pole. We'll then move into the era of the 60s, where bus design changed a bit, and a bus that's synonymous with Glasgow, the Leyland Atlantean, started to rule the streets. So we've got a number of examples of the Leyland Atlantean, including the very first one that Glasgow had that will be taking part. We'll then move into a bit more of a modern era, into the 90s, and when first started running bus services in Glasgow, and we'll have some examples of the liveries that they had, and we'll bring the story right up to date. Again, in collaboration with First, we'll have some electric buses to show people from end to end what the development of buses has been like in Glasgow.
The main thing with Glasgow 111, it's one of the first of the big batch of Glasgow motorbuses. This is the first time they'd ordered more than 2 or 3 of anything. Previously, the experimental buses were single deck. This was the first one with a top deck, and the first one to have the top deck painted green. That livery later spread to the trams, but started on the buses. Basically, a bus is still a box to carry passengers with some space for the mechanical bits and the driver. But layout has changed over the years. We have with 111 what's called a half cab. So the driver occupies a space right next to the engine to increase that box dimension for passengers. It has what's called a low bridge layout. So the gangway on the top deck is on the far off side, and it's dropped about 6 inches compared to the rest of the upper deck floor, which means that passengers on the offside downstairs have to mind their head when leaving their seat. So it is very restricted inside, but that gives extremely compact dimensions. The big difference is, if you were to go upstairs, the first thing you'd notice is the smoke, because both cigarette smoking and pipe smoking were socially acceptable at the time and widely practiced. So buses, like the trams previous, allowed smoking on the top deck, and wasn't a very healthy environment for the conductress or the conductor. The low bridge type, like 111, also had the disadvantage that you had that side gangway, so the conductor had to reach over all the way to the passenger nearest the window, get the fare that was tendered, give the change, issue the ticket, and of course that passenger then had to squeeze past 3 other people to get off.
I started in Postle Park Garage, the tail end, I was around about the October 71. I was only conductor for a couple of months until I turned 21, and then put me through Knightswood Garage driving school. And I stuck in Postle for a couple of months, and then I transferred to Gartcraig because I moved house. So I was in Gartcraig as a crew driver for quite a wee while. And then one-man operation, I went on to that. And I drove every type of thing that they had in those days, from back-enders, Daimlers, AECs, LAs. Oh, that was the fleet that they had in those days, and I quite enjoyed it.
I was a coach driver during the summer, get paid off every winter. So I went to whoever would take me. And one winter I went to Glasgow Corporation in Knightswood Garage. And as somebody said to me, it's the nearest thing you can get to joining the army without joining the army, because it ran on old army principles. So that was my introduction. And even although you had a driving licence and you were experienced, they still sent you back to the driving school for a week or two to indoctrinate you in the corporation way of thinking, which was a good one.
Corporation to me was a wee bit regimental. When I joined it, you would probably find that a lot of your chief inspectors and inspectors are ex-military. So they were walking about with their their thumb down as if they were sergeant majors. And I was a wee guy for the Carlton at the Barrers. So you found that a wee bit hard.
There was lots of humour, lots sometimes cruel humour. You could carry on anywhere in the garage except the garage office. Right, the garage office is where the time boards were given out, and that was the business of running a bus service. But elsewhere, there were canteen facilities, snooker rooms, and the garage was fun and casual. I enjoyed working in Glasgow Corporation.
You really didn't have a regular run in the corporation buses. You went on a cycle, and that cycle could take maybe a year to go right round that cycle. Plus you stayed spare for quite a wee while before you were actually put on a cycle. So you were there quite a wee while. So you really didn't get to know. It wasn't like the SMT or Eastern Scottish, Midland or Alexanders. Or these guys all had a steady run, day shift, mid shift or back shift. They got to know their passengers a lot more than us guys in the corporation did. I liked the camaraderie. Right, and it was a steady job. The crew driver, he was just sat in a wee half cab. He didn't have much to do with the public at all. It was the conductor in the back end of it. It had all the nice things said to them and all the bad things said to them and the trouble and one thing and another.
I'm still in touch with my conductress. She's got a strange name. Her name's Genevieve. Jen. You become a working team. You get to know each other very well. And as such, the job goes smoothly. My conductress had been there longer than me, so she knew the rules, the routine, everything to do. I'll sidetrack a wee bit here. I used to pick her up in the morning to take her into the garage, right? So she stayed in the high flats in Clydebank. So she came out the bottom of the high flats with a fag, the cup of coffee, and get into the car. Between there and Knightswood Garage, she applied what she called the big lie. She backcombed the hair, she got the makeup on, right? She finished the ciggy and came out like that, ready to attack the public for the day. She was absolutely super. She still is.
To be perfectly honest, it's one of the things that really makes being involved in the Glasgow Vintage Vehicle Trust is to see our visitors to the garage here or to see the general public interact with the buses and the engagement that we get. And that engagement can happen in all sorts of ways. The engagement can be as simple as somebody whipping out their phone to take a photograph of the bus going past. We see it here in the garage when we have events and have visitors round where people spot the buses, they recognise the old colours, they recognise the destinations that are on the fronts of the buses, and you hear conversations starting to go where people start to reminisce and tell stories. Different family groups come along, where grandparents are with the grandkids, and it gives them a way in which they can tell stories about their past and how it connects to what they're seeing in front of them. But seeing the general public and seeing our visitors engage with the vehicles is the rewarding aspect.
The kids love it. It's getting kids out, this computer carry-on and tablets and on their phones. You're in here, you very seldom see them on their phones.
I know myself, having the National Entitlement Card, that it does make my life a lot better, being able to go out, see friends, go to, say, a bowling club one day, to a fitness class the next, to go out shopping to the nearest town rather than just the village shop. That's the sort of thing that bus mobility brings for so many people. I do think the under 21 extension to the concessionary travel scheme is excellent because it'll get people into the habit of using buses. Buses remain very flexible in terms of transport. They can get to a number of areas quite cheaply. It costs a lot of money to build a railway or a tramway. It very much aligns with a green agenda, an environmentally conscious agenda, having buses, getting people out of their cars and onto the road. If buses run reliably and well and they're comfortable and they have features that appeal to people, then they're going to have a role to play for a long time to come.